Good evening. The writer of the Hebrews in chapter 9 continues to teach us that Jesus is far better than any of the sacrifices and rites and ceremonies of the Old Testament. He is the bearer of the new covenant. And he goes at the beginning of the chapter into quite a bit of detail about the tabernacle and the two rooms, the holy place where the priests could enter and fulfill their service there, and then the most holy place where only the high priest could enter once a year with a blood sacrifice. And now he says about this in verse 6 and further in chapter 9. When everything had been arranged like this, the priests entered regularly into the outer room to carry on their ministry. But only the high priest entered the inner room, and that only once a year, and never without blood, which he offered for himself and for the sins the people had committed in ignorance. The Holy Spirit was showing by this that the way into the most holy place had not yet been disclosed as long as the first tabernacle was still standing. This is illustration for the present time, indicating that the gifts and sacrifices being offered were not able to clear the conscience of the worshipper. They are only a matter of food and drink and various ceremonial washings, external regulations, applying until the time of the new order. You see, there was always something imperfect and provisional about the tabernacle and all of the rites and ceremonies that surrounded it. It could never clear the conscience of the worshipper. It could never gain free entrance into the most holy place for the worshipper. There always had to be a proxy, someone that represented the worshipper. The priest had to come in between the worshipper and God in a way fulfilling the worship and the sacrifice that the worshipper himself or herself wanted to do. Something had to happen. And now the writer of the Hebrews continues in verse 11 of chapter 9. When Christ came as high priest of the good things that are already here, he went through the greater and more perfect tabernacle that is not man-made, that is to say, not a part of this creation. He did not enter by means of the blood of goats and calves, but he entered the most holy place once and for all by his own blood, having obtained eternal redemption. The blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a heifer, sprinkled on those who are ceremonially unclean, sanctify them so that they are outwardly clean. How much more then will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself unblemished to God, cleanse our consciences from acts that lead to death, so that we may serve the living God? You see, this is the final part in which Jesus is the ultimate high priest. He came to give his blood as the final sacrifice, as the true sacrifice that could open up the door that was longing to be opened. The door into the most holy place, the door into the presence of God, where we are there without fear, without guilt, without wondering what we should do to be able to stay here. He, through the sacrifice of his blood, opened the door so that we may enter into the presence of God and live there freely, never having to leave again, never having to do anything to be able to stay there. Simply holding on in faith to this sacrifice that he has brought in our place. This is the freedom that we receive through the sacrifice of our great high priest Jesus Christ. Good evening.